1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Ok, og nú ert þú live á internetinu.
Strax?
Já.
Kæra Alnet, þú ert bóla sem springur. Hæ, hello. Hæ, aftur.
Ég rétt náði bóla sem springur.
En það? Og er það ekki þér til mikilvæg gleði aðra að ég verið að segja á livestreamunu að interneti verið bóla sem springi?
Jú, þetta er bara svona þýska eitthvað.
Já, nokkulega, þetta lítur að bara hætta.
Talið varlega.
Já.
And then make sure that it's low and not low. Right?
No, wait. Make sure that it's low.
Low.
Low. Yeah, well, it's low, but the blue is up.
Oppa.
But it's fine.
Getum við ekki, er þetta PDF eða?
But we can change this.
Já.
Yes, it's on.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay.
Great, fantastic.
Yes. Now we're in good shape.
Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Juliet.
Yes, I'm Kata. I read about you on the notes. Your work is fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Very good. And like, look forward to this. It's gonna be fun, yeah?
It's gonna be really fun.
Yeah.
I think I'm really
Did
excited
you
about
find
it.
coffee somewhere recently?
No, it's my cup from before, and I just like so.
Yeah. Also, if you want water, I
Okay,
brought
we're
some.
gonna get some
Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
You want a glass as well?
I have one here, thank you.
It's really cold water.
Yeah.
It's really hard to drink. It's like it's very cold.
Ég veit ekki hvað við erum að þessu svona hérna. Sko, það er svona 20. Eða svona 20.
Já.
Þá þarftu ekki að því ég er með mikrofón fram að vinna hana
Já.
og hann er stittra villi og hérna meginn.
Já.
Þarftu ekki að láta mikrofónu ganga heldur að spurningu sko upp á
Nei,
það
frábært.
heyrist það.
Já. Ok, mjög gott.
Þannig að það gengur alveg.
Já.
Ef einhver, að því ég er að vera málstöðum,
Já.
ef einhver er að sitja og svara spurningum,
Já.
það þarf að kveikja hérna, það þarf að vera ljús hérna svo þessi komið.
Hvað segir þú? Já,
Ef einhver vil sitja og svara spurningum.
Já, það verður þannig eftir ég sendi þetta. Ok, geggjum. Já, æðislegt.
Þannig ég er sem að fylgjast með þér í útsendingunni.
Ok.
Ég er svona 40-50 sekundar eftir.
Já, ef ég sendi SMS svona ekki, það er komið. Já.
En ég reyna að vera hérna á lappinu frá
Já,
tilbaka, sko. En eins og ég fylgst með því,
Já,
en
já.
eins og ég er 40 sekundar eftir útsendingunni, sko.
En ég get panikað alveg frjálsum falli í 40 sekúndur.
Yeah, we have more than Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. In Reykjavik,
Hvernig eru glærurnar?
Já, ég vil opna það sem við hafa. Þannig bara með í pápum.
Hello.
Hello everybody. My name is Katrin Oddsdóttir, and as you can hear, I'm ridiculously punctual when it comes to chairing stuff like this. Fascism is almost the word that springs to mind when it comes to my time management, so please don't be offended. It's just a way to get things done in the right time. I believe I am here chairing this session because I'm an activist, and I'm very thankful and honored for that. I'm a lawyer and I'm a lecturer here at Reykjavik University's Law Department, and most recently a PhD student at the University of Iceland in democratic constitutional design. Boom, boom. But here I am today as a citizen who actively tries to shape her society through a small NGO called the Icelandic Constitutional Society. And we will fight for the will of the nation as the constituent power to be respected. And we fight through all means possible. We fight in our parliament, on the streets, on Facebook, in the media, basically everywhere we can in society, because this is very urgent for society as a whole. But we have not had great luck with the Icelandic academia so far. Although scholars around the world have been very interested in the Icelandic constitutional process that took place from 2010 to 12 and led to what has been called the first crowdsourced constitution. But this is fortunately changing now, and we see our own academia opening up and having this really important discussion. Now, first of all, welcome back from lunch. I was so happy when I found out I had this slot, because I knew I was going to have like happier and actually nicer human beings than you were before lunch. Because in the end of the day, it's so interesting that this is what unites us. We're just humans, like a monkey species. And here today to discuss like higher education and engaging with society, it's really beautiful, I think, that we as an animal have developed like education and higher education and society, and then we meet for a whole day and discuss it. You know, I sound like very species arrogant, but I don't see a group of penguins somewhere doing this. So I think we should be happy, and especially because you know, we have research showing that, for example, judges give out much harsher rulings when they're hungry, and now we've just eaten, so I suspect this is going to be great. Now, what I wanted to do is actually introduce our speakers. You know that we had a small change, that Cecilia couldn't be with us, but fortunately we had a savior, we have a savior among us who jumped in, who is Anders. Thank you so much. And basically what's going to happen is I'm going to now introduce the speakers, and then I'm going to introduce the panelists after the speakers have spoken, and then we're going to have some sort of insanely good conversation. Is that understood? Good. Is everybody going to be part of it? Yes. Good. This is a promise that you've now made to me, and I'm going to see that you all fulfill it. Okay, so let's start with Ari. Ari received his PhD in computer science from Stanford University in 1997 and worked as a senior research scientist at NASA, Ames Research Center from 2002 to 2007. He has been the rector of Reykjavik University since 2010 and was prior to that the Dean of School of Computer Science at this university. He has he's been a lead investigator on a number of funded research projects and is a member of the Icelandic Science and Technology Council and is a board member of startup companies in Iceland. But this is a fraction of what he's done. He's done much more. But I will add a personal opinion here. Ari is a very nice guy, ridiculously likable guy, and he's a former student of my father in computer science at the University of Iceland, if I'm not mistaken. So as you can see, I'm making this very personal here. Okay. Anders Söderholm, we saw him earlier today. Wonderful to have him here. He, like they explained, is a Director General of the Swedish Higher Education Authority and obtained his PhD from Umeå University. Now, I feel it's very important to tell you that my mother once worked in a chemical lab in Umeå for a year when she was 20-something, you know. And unfortunately, she continued working with like dangerous chemicals throughout all her pregnancies. So that's probably why I'm telling you this, you know. But we heard today that Anders was also a professor of business administration at the same university and a vice chancellor at Umeå School of Business and Economics. So we have loads of information and education on this speaker panel. I'm very happy to ask Ari to start, and we'll take it from there.
All right, so thank you all for being here. What I would like to do here is to give you essentially a somewhat structured brain dump of what it means for a very young and growing university in a small society to be engaging with society through the students, through the faculty, and through constant interaction. And when I say young university, I mean young. We're founded in 1998. In the United States, we just were allowed to start drinking beer this year. Actually, we would have to wait until September. We're going to be exact. But there are a couple of things that come with being a young university. One is the premise on which we are founded. We are founded on the premise that we're supposed to have impact. The reason we're founded in 1998 is that in 1997, the laws in Iceland were changed, and it was permissible to have more than one or two predefined government universities. And the idea behind that was to increase the number of university-educated people in Iceland. So one of the impacts is to graduate a whole lot of people. Now, when we talk about what is our role for society and how do we engage, and I need to organize it in some way or fashion, this is not exhaustive, but this is to try to get a little bit of a structure around it. So first of all, and this may be the most important part, and this is under constant development, is how do universities provide the relevant education and training that society needs and that the students need. It's not just a question of asking for the skills that are needed, it's also how do you teach the current generation of students. There's, of course, research and innovation in its broadest sense. How do you participate in society through activism, policy making, knowledge dissemination, etc.? And how do you serve, as universities must, as a knowledge center for the new know-how and the analysis that society needs? So, how do we do this? So, first of all, when it comes to looking for relevant education, this is why Reykjavik University exists. We were founded by the Chamber of Commerce and later backed by other federations of the Federation of Industries and Iceland Business, which is the large umbrella association for business in Iceland. So a huge part of the Icelandic business community is behind the university. And what they wanted out of it initially, because we started out as a teaching college, is to increase the number of educated professionals in society, especially in certain areas that are highly relevant to business, like business, computers, law, engineering, technology, and more. But also to do it a little differently, to really focus on what the society needs, how can we train people to be productive and contribute to society in the workplace. This means, for instance, that program development is a constantly ongoing effort at the university. We're never done with the class syllabus. It drives the people who are in charge of documenting the programs and advertising them absolutely insane. But we're always looking at what programs we offer, developing new ones, retiring the ones that are no longer relevant, etc. And the key to doing this is to always be keeping track of educational needs. What do the companies need? What do the institutions need? What does government need? What does society need? Talking all the time with them. Some of this results in new programs. So, for example, innovation related to fisheries, information management. These are issues that have come up in recent years, and we have developed programs to respond to the needs, both the demand from students and also what society needs. But a lot of focus has actually been on interdisciplinary. And to be completely honest, when I talk to companies and institutions, they're always asking for people that don't exist yet. Universities are not yet educating the people that the workplace is asking for today. Just one example, an information technology company in Iceland came to us many years ago and said that software engineers and computer people, they're fantastic, and they create a certain amount of good things that we can sell to our customers. A computer scientist that also knows business gives us about 10 times more. So please start creating some business computer science combination people. And that's what we've been doing. We have lots of major minors. We have specialized programs that are bringing together different disciplines related to energy, related to business, etc., to provide this what is needed. But it's not enough to just develop new programs. You also have to be reviewing what you're already doing. We are always asking for feedback from the students. We do so many surveys per year that students get a little tired sometimes. But this is invaluable information for us to know, is this working? Is the methodology working? And we ask them also, is this giving you what you need to compete in the workplace, when we ask them just before they graduate. We also have regular reviews with external parties. We ask them what they see in the students that they have hired. We have a survey regularly, every other year, with the largest companies in Iceland to see how things are going. And this is also an input into how we develop our programs. And finally, we very much look towards international standards. Part of that is accreditation, but accreditation is not necessarily the best way to be on your toes and modern. So we also spend a lot of effort talking to other universities about how they are redeveloping their programs, what they're doing, so that we can learn from them. So how do you teach? How do you make sure that your teaching is engaging and connecting the students and what is happening here with society? First of all, we put a lot of emphasis on project-based learning. That's just a general mentality that we have here at the university. But one key thing, as been mentioned before, is to use external teachers. And we do this not because it's more comfortable to have part-time teachers or external teachers than having to commit to full-time hires. This is incredibly valuable for the students, and you hear it from law students who say, hearing from people who were in court yesterday how this applies to what they're learning is invaluable. Hearing from engineers who are solving problems the week before, how that applies to what they're learning, that's invaluable. And then we want them to go out. We want them to go and work with the companies, to participate in internships or in other ways to connect with companies. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And one of the key things that we have been doing is projects. Projects with institutions and companies in Iceland. We have about 15 to 20 companies and institutions that are really directly connected to us and work with us on a lot of different projects, sometimes funding them, providing expertise, etc. Some cases, like in computer science, you can't graduate without finishing a project with a company. Students here have a lot of options for working on interesting projects that companies bring up. We have our good neighbors at Isavia, which is the aviation management entity in Iceland, Icelandair, the largest airline, and so forth, banks, software companies, fishing companies, and more. And then finally, just various projects that come with industry. Okay, that's a brief brain dump of how we engage through the teaching and the education. Research, innovation, and impact. I said that we started out as a teaching college, and I mentioned that deliberately, because we didn't really change our strategy to become a research university until 2006-07. And boy, have we made a lot of progress. Since 2007, we have quadrupled the number of publications, peer-reviewed publications, per faculty member. Now I know the rankings are not the main thing, but we've made it to the top 350 on the Times Higher Education. But the really important part of us having become a research university, as well as a teaching university, is the impact that we can have. Through the technology development, through the advances in energy and sustainability, contributing to the development of government, to the laws, to the constitution of this country, to businesses, thriving, finding new ways of marketing and doing business, on issues that are current, such as gender issue and social issues, and last but not least, both the mental and the physical health of the population. Without being a research university, we couldn't teach all of this, we couldn't contribute to society in the same way. Now we have also impact in terms of people reading other people's papers. And we're tied in third place with a couple of other August institutions, MIT and Stanford, if I remember correctly. Now, the real thing is, how do you take all this know-how and make something out of it? And that's what we often call innovation. You get new know-how, how do you apply it? This slices through everything that we do. First of all, it's in the curriculum. We had the crazy idea at the foundation of the university that everybody should take a course in innovation and entrepreneurship. And today, this is a course that we run every year, mandatory for undergraduate students. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students working for 3 weeks on coming up with a business idea, developing it, presenting it, working together in interdisciplinary groups. And the beautiful thing is that every year a few companies actually come out of it. And we're lucky enough that the company that does, or the group that does best, we get to send them to Copenhagen every fall, where they participate in the university's Startup World Cup. This time it's at the end of October. But it's not just the curriculum, it's also the ethos. We want to offer faculty, staff, and others who can utilize some of the know-how that exists here to spin that off. This is something that the university has to support, not by investing. We're not investment companies, we don't ever put money into it, but we can help by protecting IP. We can help by providing facilities, access to expertise, etc. The one thing I ask you, if you're looking at this and thinking about how you can apply it, be patient. This is a long run. So we have a few startups that we are still supporting and following. One of them here, as you can see, is the application of a startup called Identifier, and it can identify automatically videos and images, and has become the de facto standard by Interpol to hunt down illegal material on the internet. But it was always a struggle, and it's been a struggle for 10 years, until last year, when it finally paid some dividends, when Facebook became a customer of that. And just so that you know, every image, every video you upload now is checked by us. But what we really want to do, and that's where the big impact can be, is for the students to have startups. They have great ideas, they have a lot of energy, and they really understand what people are looking for. So we're providing them with facilities, support. This is temporary, but this is the view of their current startup facilities, where students themselves actually decide who sits there, how they use it, but they can use this to house their startups. We go further when it comes to innovation. We don't just want to engage in innovation within the university that then goes out. We want to help innovation that's happening in society to foster and grow. We, as with University of Iceland, we're shareholders in a company called Icelandic Startups that is a grassroots organization doing accelerators, classes, connections, and competitions for young people wanting to do startups. We participate in a lot of different competitions at the primary and the secondary school level. And here's one example. Every year, Reykjavik University contributes manpower, facilities, and equipment for very young innovators to come and create, make prototypes of their ideas. And we have a big festival when we award the best ones to that. And typically the president, Minister of Education, and a number of other people attend this. It's one way to engage the primary level, the 0 to 10. We innovate also a lot with industry. We're constantly looking for opportunities. How can we work with industry to bring in new ideas, to advance things, etc. One example that touches both on innovation with industry and also student engagement is that annually a company from the fisheries industry in Iceland comes to the university and introduces a problem they have. This can be marketing problems, packaging problems, sustainability issues like carbon footprint, etc. We've had all of these. And students work in groups tackling this, and then the group with the best idea gets to go to the Boston Seafood Show and a bunch of other things. But this is from when one of the groups was actually invited to visit one of the fisheries companies and present their ideas to the board of the company as a proposed solution. Okay, then there's participation in society, dissemination. How do we contribute to things happening in society? And there is, and I'll get to that again, how we can share our know-how, the know-how that we have in the university, and that's very valuable. But even more importantly is to be active participants, to help tackle the issues and have discussions. And that means tackling really tough issues at times. This is a picture from a conference that we held here regarding sexual violence. This is one way we can impact society and use the university to engage in the dialogue that is taking place. We also, this is not propaganda, this is a question of influencing society. So there are many ways in which universities, and we do that, can help influence society, guide, encourage, etc. And this picture here is from an event that we have every single year. This event stems from the fact that women are still a minority of the students when it comes to technical degrees. In computer science, we've gotten it up to 30%, but overall, we would like to see more women choose science and technology as their study paths. So what we do is we invite every 14 or 15-year-old girl that exists in the country through their schools to come to the university where they get insight into what technology is all about and what their opportunities are. And then we take them to collaborating companies all around the city, and we've also done this in good collaboration with the University of Akureyri, where they meet female role models that work in technical jobs in respected tech companies. This is a way to influence society. And then be a knowledge center, share your expertise, share your know-how, etc. One more thing, we're also a transfer, we're also a conduit for international knowledge. And this is very important because we are a small country, we can't know everything, can't be the experts at everything. We need to funnel a lot of the things that are going on into the country, and the universities help with that. We'll get back to that a little bit later. We work a lot with universities in the Nordics, in the United States, including MIT. And one of the things that we've been able to do is not just to get visitors to come here and talk to people. We've actually been sending company representatives and going with them to universities abroad for them to hear firsthand what is going on in management, technology, all of these things that are going on. Okay, this sounds all very good. It's really, really hard. This really is difficult to do because in a university you have so many things that are pulling on each other. So when you make the engagement with students and society such a big part of what you do, how do you motivate faculty and staff to be doing this all the time? Because as from their point of view, often this is on top of everything else they're supposed to do in terms of teaching and publication. How do you balance things? And how do you do this without sacrificing the quality of the education and research you're doing? I don't have a secret recipe. I can just tell you how we think about it. So first of all, we talk about this engagement, our role in society all the time. Remind people. I think there's hardly a staff meeting we have where we don't have the role of Reykjavik University is to for society and its students. That's why we exist. We work hard to connect faculty with the society, with institutions, so they can work with parliament, they can work with companies, etc., etc. And then the flip side is we work to draw companies in, engage them, make them interested in working with us. It's a big balancing act in many, many, many ways. There's always the danger of university people going out into industry or into society and saying, we have all the answers. Here is the magical solution to all your problems. That doesn't work. But we're not made to order shop either. Companies and institutions can't come in here and, can you please work on this for us? Produce this for us. There's to be a balance between those. How do we encourage industry impact, working with fisheries companies and energy companies and parliament, while also publishing in peer-reviewed journals and articles? And how do we deal with the cultural issues? The cultural issues inside the university. Why are we doing all this and why are you adding this all on top? And the cultural issues of the companies not understanding what universities are working on. So this all needs to be balanced. And then finally, you can only do this if you have a very strong mentality of quality when it comes to the education and the research. Otherwise, it all gets lost. So in order to maintain the focus, there has to be a strong focus on always making sure the education and the teaching is of high quality and that the research is being evaluated and rewarded so that we continue to be a university. And this is at least so far successful. Student applications exceed our capacity to accept them. We get on about twice as many applications as we can accept. Companies are more and more wanting to work with us, but it's not like they're still lining up at the door, but it's getting there. And we're lucky enough to be on the rankings that don't matter. 52nd best young university in the world. But now I'm going to take one example, just to wrap this up, of how we do things. The world is changing. We are seeing the biggest change in jobs, society, people since the first industrial revolution, possibly even bigger. This is called sometimes the fourth industrial revolution, the second machine age, the technology revolution. The minister called it the ICT revolution. It's changing everything. Students, society, jobs. So how do we as a university tackle this? We need to adapt and change and expand the education we provide. We need to provide the local expertise. We need to import the international knowledge that I mentioned. We need to drive innovation to create value in the future. And we need to help address the societal challenges that come with jobs disappearing and changing. So this, of course, requires the university to develop a new strategy. And we did that. But we've made two things clear. First of all, we're going to build it on the foundations that we already have: quality of education, good workplace, strong research, engagement in society, and all of these things. The second thing we did is to go out and ask a bunch of people. And one of the linchpins in all of this were meetings that we had between the Board of Trustees and the students, between the students and the Board of Directors, between us and companies, and us working with international collaborating universities. This all had to be done as input before we could even start to figure out what the university should do. And this really is the engagement that I'm talking about. We can then map it to all the key issues that we have, and then develop the strategy for 2020 plus. And if you want an explanation for the 2020 plus, 2020 is just such a cool year that you have to use it. Unfortunately, it's only about 15 or 20 minutes away. So the plus was added there to give us a little bit more leeway. So, in conclusion, universities exist to serve and impact society. So, universities must develop with the society and the needs of society. And when there is a big change taking place, as is happening today, universities must develop with it. And over the next 5, 10, maximum 20 years, everything about universities is going to change. There's a huge change that's going to have to take place within universities, as it will within society. But the one thing that universities must maintain is the emphasis on maintaining the quality of their education and the quality of the creation of the knowledge that they do. Thank you.
Very good, very good, very good. Just as an example of the beautiful course Ari was talking about, where we are forced, no matter what we're studying, to be together and form some sort of idea and make a business plan and so on. I did my law degree here, and I was put on this course, and I was like, why do I have to do this? But I had an idea to make a cartoon about, or a little cartoon explaining to children what sexual violence was and how they could deal with if they were entrapped or something like that. And we did a bit presentations with the business guys and the engineers and everything, and explained this. And the rector at the time, which was Svava Grönfeldt, for some reason came into the pitch. And she liked the idea, so she ended up actually supporting us in making the film happen, and now it's available to every kid online on Reykjavik's website. So it's not only about companies and competition, it's also a matter of compassion and things working out for the greater good and no profit.
It's not that one.
Oh.
That was the one.
And I'm going to talk about, which one would you like?
Part 2.
Oh, this one there?
Yep.
Okay. Beautiful. This looks just the same, but even better somehow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Anders, and enjoy yourself.
Okay. So I got this email from Sigge saying it was like yesterday, no, it was like Thursday evening. Call me at your earliest convenience. So I called him Thursday night, and he said that Cecilia had been ill and had to be, and asked if I could do a presentation instead of her. I know that she would have been talking very much about how to integrate migrants and the new Swedes that has come to the country over the last few years into the regular educational system, and how to really reach out for the new groups in society, which Malmö University, where she is working, has been a role model, I would say, in Sweden in doing this. However, I wouldn't dare to go into that lacking the knowledge that she had. So what I said to Sigrid, that I could do a presentation on how we evaluate or quality assure the universities, and especially how the impact of the university's education can be made as a part of the quality assurance system. And I'm very impressed by your presentation, Ari. It seems that there's a very systematic approach at the university, and that I think is sort of the basic of getting quality in the long term, that you do it not just now and then, but in a systematic way. And thank you for sharing that with us. We have a system of higher education and research, including around 40 different institutions around the country. Most of them are public. There are some private, but they are still funded by the public. So there's taxpayer money that is used for this all over the country, independent of the status of the different institutions. And we are the national authority that are responsible to run the quality assurance system to secure that quality of the education, given that all these institutions are quality required. Now this can be done, of course, in various ways. We have had a movement in Sweden, and I know in many other countries as well, where the political governance is not deciding on the details, but more on the framework of the institution. The money is not given for specific purposes, it's given in lump sums, and then universities are expected to do all the things that are required. And as this has been made the major sort of political governance system, the quality assurance has been there as a replacement of the detailed input control into a goal control on the output side. Now, over the time, we have done it in different ways. We have had only program evaluations made. We have had periods where we evaluated the quality assurance system of the universities only, and it's been discipline-oriented or program-oriented, so it's been all kind of different ways to perform this quality assurance system. But where we are today is that the university is holding the responsibility for the quality. It's not us that has to be there in every classroom to decide whether the quality is good or not. The university has to be able to do that themselves. I think that was basically what you were saying as well. And we as a quality assurance agency come there just to secure that you have the procedures in place to make that happen. So instead of controlling each single program, we secure that the university has procedures in place to actually do that themselves. So instead of this detailed control of the program quality, it's a trust-based control of the quality assurance systems of the university. And I think this is one principle that is, or one consequence or reason for this, is what I was speaking on this morning, that this system not only accepts universities to be different, it supports the idea of universities being different, because we ask you what kind of profile do you have, and you cannot, you have to answer that. And obviously universities will come up with different answers. Universities will have different emphasis in their profile. I think it's an excellent example. You're giving a account of what a young university can actually do when there is not a root system creating a lot of tightness to the history, whereas the Iceland University could have another story to tell, which is equally good, but in another way. And this is the idea behind our system as well. Just to give you an overview, these are the 4 components that actually was decided by the government a few years ago. We do program evaluations because the politicians didn't really trust universities. So they said, well, we cannot give that away totally, you have to do a small part of that. But instead of doing 4,000 program evaluations over a cycle, we do like 300, like a selection. We do a teacher education program, the nursing programs, some PhD programs, and selection of program evaluations. But that is, a fraction of what we used to do in the past. When university would like to start a new professional degree, they have to be accredited to do that. So general bachelor and master programs, universities could start as on their own, following some sort of requirements that they have set up. Again, what you were saying was the same, that you have some procedures to decide whether a new program is really needed, what kind of society it responds to, what kind of student demand it sort of focuses on. That has to be done by the universities. But in Sweden, professional degrees like a new engineering degree or a social works degree, there are a number of specified degrees where accreditation is actually needed for us in each and every case the university would like to start a new program. Thematic evaluations are quality enhancement evaluations like sustainability, equal opportunities, student influence. It could be any kind of broad theme. And then the new component from a Swedish perspective is the institutional reviews of the quality assurance processes, which I was mentioning earlier. And actually I have to say that one of the role models when designing this system was actually Iceland and Scotland and Netherlands. I think Iceland and Scotland has some tight connections. And we were very impressed by what had been achieved in the Scottish and Icelandic system in terms of creating a collegiate responsibility for the quality of the programs. What we do then is quite standard. I'm now talking about the institutional reviews. There is a peer review team, of course. There are some assessment reports, both from the university and from the student unions. There are at least 2 campus visits. We have some legal supervision that we have as a basis for this as well, and national statistics on for example, the throughput rates of the university and the placement rates of the university. And we come to the university once every 6 years, and in total it takes a year, a little bit more than a year to do this. And there are a number of assessment areas that we concentrate upon, 6 of them. Each of these assessment areas has to be met by the university. If they fail in one of these, it's a failing result in the total. So each one of them has to be met. And the 3 on the left-hand side, I would say, are the system requirements, the policy making part, but also the delivery and actually the practice of the education. And design, delivery, and results of programs. We would normally expect university to have some sort of external peer review of their own programs, exactly again as what you were saying, Ari. But some of the biggest universities has solved that in other ways. But I would say that the most convincing way of actually proving that you have some quality control on the program level is that a university itself has some sort of mechanism to get outside reviews, outside peer reviews of the program content, both from other academic peers, of course, but also from stakeholders. So that component, design, delivery, and results of programs, require the university to show us in what way they secure that the learning outcomes are met in each and every program, and that the relevance of the program is there in terms of the content and the placement of students. And the 3 themes on the right-hand side, or the 3 components on the right-hand side, are perspectives that from different reasons has been included in the system. You know, we have a government claiming to be feminist, so equal opportunities was something that it was pushed by the political side as one of the values that a university has to meet. Equal opportunities is We expect universities to have programs for equal opportunities to secure that there is a transparency in the processes of hiring people, but also in student recruitment, where they try to make this as equal as possible. Students should be really student involvement, so we secure that the rights that are given to the students are actually met at the university in terms of student on committees, different boards, and as co-creators of the education as well. And on the right-hand side, the cooperation impact, which is involvement of the outside, the working life, stakeholders. It could be anything from public organizations to private organizations, and how to secure that the cooperation with outside world is actually carried out in a way that contributes to the quality of the program. So we look at all these 6 areas. The peers are making a decision based on sort of the description on what should be met within each one of these assessment areas. I think it's in general, it's similar to what you do in Norway, and it's similar to what you do in Iceland as well in terms of assessing the quality of the quality system, so to say. These are just to exemplify what kind of requirements we have within the different components, that the quality system should be efficient, the roles should be there, etc., etc. There should be a policy-making level that is actually working. Whereas, which I think this one is the most important assessment area. Universities continuously follow up the quality programs, define quality improvement areas, act to enhance quality and secure that actions taken have effect. And that is the quality cycle more, where you have to be aware of the quality of your programs, but also making those actions to improve quality where so it's required. And that first item there, I think, is the most important part of of our system, where we require the universities to actually have the quality control on the program level. So we have 3 outcomes. You could either be approved, you could be conditionally approved, or you could be not approved, depending on how well you meet the requirements. And one of the basic principles is the university, as I said, has the responsibility. And I think one thing that we struggle with is how to design a system like that. It has to be strict enough to secure that the university actually do this, but it has to be inclusive enough to really stimulate the collegiate discussions at the university. It should not be, we should not be seen as a controlling authority, but as a authority that actually is there to stimulate and make universities' energy to be used for quality enhancement procedures. So that I think is one of the balancing acts of the system itself. The other one, which I would like to conclude with, is a problem that I see lying in this system is that, if we go back to this picture, how should we define the threshold value for the 3 items on the right-hand side? What is an acceptable level or a non-acceptable level of cooperation and impact? And there is not a common understanding on where that threshold is. For the left-hand side, we could rely on a number of things to create the threshold, and there is also the universities are used to have these responsibilities. But on the right-hand side, it's a little bit more tricky. And I'm afraid that our threshold value is the least, the lowest possible acceptable level of cooperation impact. That is where our evaluation will end up. And I would like to be a little bit more ambitious. But then some universities would say that, well, we have not agreed on what this is, what is really equality in terms of cooperation and impact. So this is a discussion that is, I think, we need to have in the university system as a whole. What is the threshold value for the different perspectives on the right-hand side? So balancing the strictness and the inclusiveness and creating ambitious threshold values, I would say, are the challenges that I see we are facing right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm now going to introduce the panelists, and I would ask for Ari and Anders also to be up here, so people could ask whatever they want from their talks. So that's great. Please just have a seat. I'm also going to introduce the first one, who is Julian Kurlo, and he's the Executive Committee member and International Officer of the National Union of Students in Denmark. And that union represents 165,000 higher education students, which is like half of Iceland's population, you know. He's also the chairman of Students Organizing for Sustainability International, and is also pursuing a MH degree in Global Development at Copenhagen University. Julian is a representative for students in Denmark at the board of the European Students' Union, and is a member of European Higher Education Area Advisory Group on Social Dimension under the Bologna Follow-up Group. And finally, Julian is the co-founder of Student Refugees, a program that facilitates guidance for refugees to higher education in Denmark. In other words, very hard not to fall in love with Julian when reading about it. So please take a seat, Julian. Thank you for the Now, we have Sigurður Kristinsson, who was here this morning, of course, chairing the session we had before lunch. Sigurður, please come. He's a professor of philosophy, a faculty of social science in the University of Akureyri. He specializes in ethics, including applied ethics, as well as social and political philosophy. He earned his PhD in philosophy from Cornell University in '96 and has since held positions at the University of Missouri and the University of Akureyri. For 7 years, Sigurður was the Dean of School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Akureyri, and he currently leads an interdisciplinary research group studying the democratic role of universities, combining philosophy with empirical higher education studies. And I had 10 minutes talking to Sigurður for the first time in my life in lunchtime, and I think it's very nice. We were talking about if sociopaths were genetically or loads of interesting stuff. So I'm sure that's not going to come up here today, but we have Ellen. And Ellen, please come. Ellen was, of course, introduced earlier today. It took Sigurður 10 minutes to explain all her achievements. She is higher education, this woman, you know, and I think two things are very cool. I'm not going to repeat everything about you, which of course is still great, you know, but I love the part about being an international co-investigator at the Center for Global Higher Education. Now beat that. It sounds like what do you do? Well, I'm an international co-investigator at the global educational thing. It's just very cool. Secondly, I would like to say that academics should, of course, never generalize, but I'm here as an activist, so I would like to emphasize the fact that she's Irish, because Irish people are obviously the best people in the world.
I'm actually American.
Ah, well, she's not one of the best people in the world. Let that be stated.
It's a bad place to be in the States.
Well, you're working in Ireland, so it sort of saves you.
40 years.
Okay, but this means that we have loads of interesting people with loads of information here in their brains, and then we have all of you. So what we're going to first do is allow the new panelists to actually have 5 minutes of sort of responding to what they heard from the speakers. And I'm on the clock, you know, as always. And then we're going to make it into a Q&A, which is the most interesting part in my opinion. So you all have to participate frantically in that part. So if Ellen, you would start, that would be great.
Gosh. Put on a hot
You can maybe go up so then the streaming can hear you. Will you do that for me?
Stand up there.
Yeah, can you?
Okay. Okay, thanks Thanks very much, and thank you both very much. We've moved from an all-female panel to a much more almost male panel. This is interesting. But anyway, thank you both very much. Lots of interesting issues. Some of my issues are really about questions, particularly the foundation of Reykjavik University. What did that say about the other institutions in terms of their ability to fulfill certain issues, that there was obviously a demand out there for a certain type of institution. I thought one of the questions that always comes up, because I had this, I was a dean for quite a long time, again we have a lot of external people coming in to teach, is how do you quality assure the teaching capacity and ability of people coming in? That seems to me to be always an issue. Knowing something is not the same thing. We have those issues with our own, with staff who are permanent, but it's an ongoing issue on the other side of how do we quality assure that, and what kinds of demands and do we put onto that. And then just another general comment that comes up also with regard to Andrew's comment about what's the threshold value, and how do you actually set out that issue about cooperation and impact, and what is it? How do you measure it? I mean, this is really the big issue. There's lots of things out there that are now being drawn up as indicators, but are they actually getting to it? So you often get these kinds of things that say, well, we're going to count the number of staff who are involved in projects. Well, what does that mean? I mean, they could be involved for a second. You could be involved in depth. I mean, what are we actually counting here? And all these things become a problem. And so now I make a bit of a comment, maybe a bit of a criticism rather, because there's been a referencing to the fact that we now have rankings looking at impact. Please do not go down that road. They are very poor. The Times Higher Education so-called thing looking at SDGs is really a ranking of research. It is not about impact. It is not about anything. Please do not go down. I make a plea as someone who works on rankings, do not go down and look at these things as if they have some meaning. They have not. It's a commercial product looking for jumping on a bandwagon. So I just make that. And just my final comment that seems to me in this space is to really look at the idea of curriculum and how we design curriculum as a co-process, and whether or not that provides a way forward as opposed to looking for courses. And because what we tend to do is we design certain courses and put them together and we get a program. But what about taking a completely different approach and looking at curriculum? And now we're co-producing both as a group or whoever is involved in it, and it can be both internal and external, but it is a discussion around what it is this subject is about, and allows potential for much more cross-disciplinary and multi-approaches and a much more cohesive approach to education. Thank you.
Great. Julian, would you please go next?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello. So I got a lot of thoughts and ideas listening to both presentations. And I want to say, Ari, about your presentation, I'm first going to say one thing that I agree with you, that is higher education institutions must create an impact. And that impact is about improving society as a whole. And the way of doing so is by focusing on the multiple purposes of education. And that's when it comes to criticism to your presentation, which is not only about responding to the company's needs and what the job market is requiring at the time. I've been in many of these conferences, and I've been in many of, I've heard many times universities and rectors and talking about how they're working on their programs. And I've heard the term startup a lot of times. I've heard the term of innovation a lot of times. I've heard a lot about how to respond to needing more engineers, needing more people in math, and dealing with a new informatic revolution. Rarely you hear the word climate change. And rarely you hear the fact that we are very close to what it could be the the biggest disaster of our time in the earth as human beings. And that's not what is taken all the time of these presentations. What we're talking about is how can we respond to what are the companies asking us right now. And there's what I feel that sometimes universities and governments are missing a little bit this perspective on the multiple purposes of education, which I think has a lot to do with the concept of engaging with society. Getting a job and getting students to be well prepared for the job market is one of these purposes. So I'm very thankful that you're focusing on that, because we need to have students that can get out in the job market and then have a good job and, develop our societies from that side. But that's not the only focus that our institutions should have, and that shouldn't be the thing that is taking 90% of the time we're using to make a presentation about engagement with society. I don't think it's totally the fault of universities that this happens. I think it is the fault of a society overall that has gone into this direction, into seeing universities as spaces that need to focus on output, focus on graduates, focus on what are the levels of employments that we're getting out of it. If I can mention how it works in Denmark, if an education specifically doesn't get a certain level of students through employment in the first 1 or 2 years, then those educations need to close it. So universities are pushed towards, commodifying or making their educations more relevant for the job market, because otherwise they fear that they will that their educations will be closed. Funding is also bound to how many students are getting into the job market. So if universities do not get enough graduates to the job market, then they fear they will lose money. And on top of that, we have governments that base our education, start measuring education through spreadsheets, and they're missing sometimes the core values of educations. And sometimes we have as well some very big lobby groups that have maybe a little bit too much power into our education systems. Education, as we have seen in previous presentations, the amount of people going to university has improved. We have many more people, and that's fantastic, but that means that many people have many more interest in education. And that also includes some groups of people who have a big interest that getting a job is the only purpose of our educations. And what happens with all these pressures that our institutions have, with all these social pressures that politicians are putting into our universities, then we find out to narrow down what is the purposes of engaging with society, engaging with our communities, to be mainly narrowed into getting a job, having good partnerships with companies, and then have a little bit of the other things, dealing a little bit with climate change, dealing a little bit with overall civic engagement. And that's I think is something that is dangerous. When I was in a conference not long time ago in Bologna, I met somebody from the National University of Ireland. There is a campus in Galway there, and they have a fantastic program on sustainability called Learn, Live, and Lead. They said that universities should learn and teach students to deal with sustainability, to improve their societies. They should live in a sustainable way, and they should lead that change. And to narrow it very down, I think it's a very good tool that we can use to talk about engagement with society. In one side, when it comes to learning, we need to create critical citizens, and this has been mentioned a lot. But these critical citizens should not only be critical to be able to, be the most innovative in the job market, but they should also be critical to criticize that same job market that can be damaging for our society sometimes. We need to focus on high quality in education. Our education needs to be relevant for society, for all levels of society. Again, not only employment, but all levels of society, as well as how to deal to improve our communities in other ways. And it should cooperate with all levels of societies, and as well rediscuss what is the ethics of our research, and consider whether what we're researching right now is what is the most ethically correct in the times we're living. On top of that, universities need to live in a responsible way. And I think it's something that I'm sometimes missing a little bit of universities talking about. Universities to engage with they engage per se with their community, not only because they have programs that engage with communities, but also they engage because they're massive institutions, they're massive employers, they're huge structures that employ a lot of people, that get a lot of people to define their futures. That also means that university needs to live in a sustainable way. They need to have fair employment conditions. They need to make sure that their students, when they're going through they're not going down with stress and getting mentally ill. They need to consume in a sustainable way. We need to make sure that the food that we're consuming that is sustainable, that the energy system of our universities is sustainable. And as well, we need to look in where we put our money when we invest. Universities invest a lot of money, and it's not a surprise that a lot of money actually goes to the oil industry. Maybe it's not the best thing we should be investing right now if we want to be sustainable universities. These are just examples. I'm not talking about Reykjavik University, it's a general comment, but it's something you can, for example, see a lot in Copenhagen University, in the Danish Technical University. In Denmark, a lot of the investments of universities, they go, for example, in research of how we can produce more oil for profit reasons. The same, there was a huge movement in the UK about students fighting against that. So that's something we need to look into. And finally, my final point is about leading. I think higher education needs to be at the forefront of what our society needs. And even when that is the time that requires to tell society that what they are telling us that it needs, maybe that's not really the thing, maybe we need something different. Universities should be able to not only to respond to those needs, and to say, well, we not need more people in engineering, we need more people here, but it should also be able to rebuild the society, to make a better one, because we need that level of criticism, and to be fearless. Because what's going to happen is that higher educations have a massive amount of power and responsibility, and I think we're all aware about it, but I don't think we're aware enough about how much power and responsibility we have. And I think we're not seeing that full potential of education, and that has led us sometimes to follow a little bit these tendencies and narrow a little bit down on what the purpose and what potential is, without bring us to forget that actually our goal is to change society, to make it a better place. And I think it will take a long time for politicians to get this. I think people in parliament might take a little bit longer sometimes to see that wider potential. But my dream is that when politicians forget about it, the universities and students together, they manage to go against those trends and to manage to rebuild society and to manage to remember that multiple purpose that education has and that engagement. And that do not fear to be a little bit rebel. Because in order to change our society and make it better, in order to respond to the overall needs that our society has, especially including climate change, we need our university students to be rebels together. Because that's how we make real change. So that's an encouragement. I think it's a call for hope and to keep working forward, to rethink and remember that education is something more than just focusing on outputs of employment, on graduate employment, but it's also about something that goes way beyond that. And that way beyond that should not take a secondary place, but should be at the same core of the education. That's my comments.
It's very tempting for me to say just whatever he said. Just take a seat. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions in this panel. There are just so many things that I would like to say, so I have to be selective. Thank you, Ari, for this very impressive presentation of the Reykjavik University and the ways that it systematically actually follows through on its aim of engaging with society. And what was so clear in that presentation is how, in order to actually make progress, you need to know exactly what it is that you are aiming at, and you have to be very systematic and relentless in trying to get there. Having said that, I think this would be then a model for any university and so a challenge to any university to say what it is that they want to do as in terms of impacting society. Reykjavik University speaks fairly clearly about how they want to impact society, and they're doing a good job of actually, doing what they say they want to do. Every university should do that. And then considering all the possibilities of influencing society, try to be not everyone doing what sort of copying each other. That's why we have many institutions. So that's the great value of that. Universities must decide first what counts as impact. That is in the impact that we want to have. What sort of value is it that our university aims to bring to society? And universities are very powerful institutions and can sort of use their muscle in very different direction. So this is the most important question. What is of value that the university is in a unique position to actually bring about and bring society? That maybe other institutions like hospitals or elementary schools or whatever, fish factories cannot do. Now, having said that, I'm very preoccupied with the question of democracy and how universities can actually play a role in improving our democracy and sustaining a democratic culture and a healthy democracy. And I would like to then sort of take this opportunity to brainstorm a little bit about what it is that would count as help in that respect. Critical thinking is the first thing that came to my mind, and this has been mentioned several times, and that's sort of a confirmation that this is probably extremely an important component as a sort of democratic competence. And what is critical thinking? There are many different definitions of that. I would like to just define it here as the ability and the interest in carefully deciding whether to accept a proposition, whether to reject it, or whether to suspend judgment, depending on what evidence exists and what is at stake. Carefully deciding whether to accept, reject, or suspend judgment. The opposite of this is somehow needing to have an opinion about everything, either agreeing always with what whoever spoke last or the most powerful person, or always rejecting it sort of automatically, using social media to maybe in capital letters even to make sure that everyone knows your opinions and so on. And this is almost like an epidemic in society. I think people voicing their opinions, which is a good thing, but voicing them maybe in a way that does not reflect a whole lot of critical thinking. Why do we need critical thinking for democracy? That's because in a democracy, we're all equal, and all the voices have an equal say, an equal position as potential ways of influencing ultimate decision-making for the common good. And so every time we voice an opinion, concerning social matters at least, we are acting as democratic citizens, and there's a certain responsibility that comes with that. And some people are very good at it, others are not. People spend lots and lots of time in schools, and schools could do a whole lot more and better in actually training, making sure that we're training in this capacity, and we are interested in sort of nurturing it. Another thing is commitment to democracy itself. And how do we do that? We use the university as a place where people get practice in participating in collective decision-making through democratic norms. Student unions do this a whole lot. There are conversations between university management and students that could amount to this to some extent. But the respect for democratic values, human rights, and the fundamental equality of all citizens, this is part of the commitment to democracy that need to be nurtured. Public spiritedness is the third thing I want to mention. That's sort of a concern for the common good. Of course, we have our private sites and we have our public sites. So there's nothing wrong with having a private life. That is it. Well, it's necessary for everyone to have a private life. But our being citizens, we need to ask about what does that mean to be a citizen in a democratic society? Does that mean having a successful and happy private life? And participating in common life, maybe by using your vote every 4 years. That's a very minimal definition of citizenship in a democracy. And if we do it like this, we're placing a whole lot of trust in those who actually volunteer to take active part in the political process. And very often they're good at it, sometimes they're not. But I think there are certain dangers in this kind of mentality, and dangers of political apathy, and dangers of opportunities for demagoguery and populism. And that brings me to the next thing, which is simply the commitment to reason, which is, well, it's waning in the world today. We have very powerful positions who are actually basing their political success on people's willingness to accept propositions without asking for reasons, and propositions that are just plainly false. And somehow this norm that says, well, whoever speaks the truth, somehow we need to listen to that voice rather than the voice that is plainly saying something that's untrue. This norm is being challenged and is in danger. Politicians lie blatantly, and they earn votes by lying. I think we can all agree that there are examples of this. So what can universities do? Well, universities are supposed to be driven by concern for truth and knowledge, right? So speak truth to power, nurture democratic principles, nurture respect for civility, which is the commitment to resolving conflict through dialogue and peaceful means, appealing to reason and a sense of community, and not a division and shouting at each other and demeaning or belittling your opponent. Competence in articulating your thoughts and communicating effectively. That's another thing that is very important and relevant for democracy. This is something that universities are in a unique position to nurture in both students and faculty. Well, I could go on and on. And maybe the last thing I want to mention in this respect is that when we speak, often when we talk about civic engagement of universities, the discussion leads quickly to jobs, spin-offs and companies and so on, which are, of course, to be celebrated. But we don't all have to be doing that. We need to remember that universities are good at very many other things as well, and have a long tradition of doing other things well also. I want to mention liberal arts education and that whole tradition, which really all the things that I have been enumerating as relevant democratic competencies. Liberal arts education, by and large, is designed and proven through over time to serve these aims. And so we should be very careful not to look at liberal arts education and humanities generally as, I don't know, something that, yes, we need to have it, but it's not a priority. It should be a priority for any university system to make sure that there's a lot of energy invested in these fields. And we need to make sure that we don't talk in ways that will take away from young people the courage and confidence of actually following their curiosity and setting out for maybe a journey of self-transformation that they don't and cannot know when they start out where it's going to lead them. One of the best analyses of the reasons for going for liberal arts education that I know has been presented by a philosopher called Agnes Callard. And her theory is the theory of aspiration. So she claims that what explains this journey is something called aspiration, which is when you choose something not as a customer, because a customer on the market has to know first what it is that your needs are, and what it is that you want, so you can assess whether that product is going to serve your needs. No, for aspiration, you have an idea of what kind of person you might be, but you also sense that it's not until you are that person that you can actually value and really want the things that make that kind of existence valuable. And to set out on a journey like that takes courage and confidence and role models. And we have to make sure that as universities and university systems and as systems of quality assurance and quality enhancement, we have a lot of respect for this aspect of higher education. Okay, I will stop now. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. We have loads of stuff at the table outside. Who wants to start? We now have, yes, we have a question. Okay, great. We have a wonderful president of MESC here who is going to give it advice. So please, if you could just say your name. If the question is directed at a certain person, that would be really great. And if it's short, that would be very good.
My name is Louis Beeks from the University of Iceland Graduate School. I'm glad that the word humanities was mentioned as a scholar of 17th century French. That really warmed my heart. That brings me to a question for Adi. Could you envision in the future, because I saw in your conclusions, all those points would almost argue for the implementation of some kind of humanities component to the curriculum here. Do you have any plans for that? Would you envision that? I think it's very important.
I agree that the humanities play a tremendously important role. In this, we are a small institution, and we are forced to focus on what we do in terms of education, research, and all of these things. But one of the wonderful things about the university system in Iceland and the collegial, collaborative system that the entire global university system is that you can get so much out of collaboration. So let's just take, for example, since University of Iceland, we have expertise in automated reasoning, in data analysis, in computer science, lots and lots of cool things like that. University of Iceland has unparalleled expertise in the Icelandic language. So what do? We work together on the linguistic programs and linguistic centers that are going to be the foundation for future technology being able to speak Icelandic. And we need to do the same thing in a lot of different ways. So, one way for us to bring in the expertise that we don't have within the university, and this goes for all the universities, is to collaborate. And we're aware of where our expertise ends, and we very actively seek collaboration with others. But so the focus that we put on what we can contribute is not any kind of a prioritization of what is important in life. It's what we contribute, and in combination with everybody else in the university system here and overall, hopefully we can line up our specializations in a way that we cover everything and work on it together.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have another. Thank you. If you want to comment at any point, you will just have to make a sound of some sort, unless you're specifically asked. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm Frida Björk from the Iceland University Art, and I just wanted to ask Julian a question, because your input was something that really cut to the core of things, I felt very strongly, and it should be our reference in terms of success, particularly now in the 21st century. So I'm just wondering, because I think all of us that work in academia and are trying to sort of improve our institutions feel that we have opportunities for students to cut through like we did, but they don't. So I'm just wondering, very big question that has to do with democratic processes. Do you have any idea or any ideas about how this could be done? What kind of conversation do we need to conduct with our students in order to make this happen?
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me answer a little bit closer. I think that's a very good point. I think what I mentioned in my intervention was not something that is a criticism towards higher education institutions. It's something and much less about Reykjavik specifically. I think it's a societal challenge that we have. This societal challenge affects governments, it affects institutions, and it affects students as well. So this narrative that we're talking about, it is something that students are taught now since they're very little. Since they're kids, they're taught that the goal of going to university is to get a job because the purpose of education is. So I think one of the reasons why students might not speak up about it is also because they're products of as well this new narrative on the purpose of education. I also think that many students do have similar opinions than me. I think the wide majority of students have it, and they also, even if they haven't had the possibility of having a proper reflection on that, but internally they're worried about their societies. They're worried about their democracies, they're worried about the rise of extremist movements, they're worried about climate change. We can see it on the streets. Iceland has a very strong youth sort of Fridays for Future movement, so they are worried about those things. I think what higher education institutions need to be is need to give a hand to students to have a discussion together with them on how can we rediscuss how we built this institution, how we can give you ownership of it over this, and how can we all together rebuild, like base these tools that we have this to give an answer to the problems that you experience in yourselves. Because it could be that many of the students that are not raising those questions in the university senates, they're raising those questions where they're in protests on the streets. And that could be because maybe they don't see the universities as a space where that change can happen. That could be because there's a lot of a lot of things that seem inflexible. It could be because it could be that they assume that that's something that universities do not do. I think higher education institutions have a role on having a strong dialogue together with students and saying, let's start from zero. Let's re-democratize our education. Let's rediscuss the purpose of education. And I think we rarely do so. We often talk about details. We often talk about how can we change the specific things. But we rarely sit down and say, okay, let's have one full day with our student representatives, with the leadership of the university. We're going to sit together and say, like, what are the values of our education? What is the purpose? And once we do that, how do we put it in practice? So my encouragement to you as leadership of university is to give the first step for that. Because I think you have a lot of power. I mean, you do have a lot of power of doing so. And saying, well, we're going to have a chat with students, with staff, with teachers, with leadership, on rediscussing what is the purpose of our education. And when we have that discussion, we're going to all together rebuild our education system to target those tasks. Because I think that you will find that a lot of students will be, you know what, I actually have a lot of ideas on how to do so. I might have never been asked on how to rebuild it.
Very good. Just before you start, Ellen has asked for the word, and I'm going to allow her to have sort of a panelist priority, which is a new word.
Me to have priority. Can I widen out the discussion that's on the table? I think it's a really important one. I think Ari started with looking at 2020 plus, but I think we're increasingly looking at 2040, 2050 and beyond. And the focus and attention, and it seems to me a lot of our attention is about students as 18-year-olds, or when we talk about mature students, they're still first-time students. But our populations aren't like that. The populations are changing, and the older 60-plus population are growing and living in longer, and yet we have these really quite phenomenal big issues on the table, climate change being one and so on. The biggest issue that we've talked about in reference to the country where I was born and the problems there and the country next to me, age, education, to some extent geography, urban, rural, and gender are really the big dividers. Age and education level is the key one. And people go in, we need an education system that is much more fluid, because once you've been in, these problems are now, we need to have active, engaged citizens of all ages who can vote. The pattern of voting that we see as support, let's call it support for Trump, for Brexit, and so on, what's happening in Hungary and Eastern Europe, is an older education, it's an older population, in many cases with less education, or had an education and not now. So the discussion is good, but it needs to embrace more than the idea that the students we have are just 18-year-olds or first-timers. They may be older students, but they're still first-timers. Educational system and the university's role in that needs to be much wider, and to look at the student cohort as a much wider set of issues. And I would really just ask that we try and embrace this wide student from now until universal education means is that people will still need and want to be educated up into the 60s and 70s. We need an active, engaged citizens able to understand many of the issues that have a science or knowledge base to them, for which that knowledge base is quite different from the time we may have been students.
Yes, wow. Completely agree. Yes, I'm from the Swedish National Union of Students. I was kind of thinking of touching upon that, Ella, because in the, I don't know if it's if it's what this conference is called, but it's purpose and relevance of higher education for students and society. And it kind of divides those two aspects and saying that students is one thing and society is another. But in reality, it's just as you say, students are society in some sense. So I think we have to sort of broaden it. But I have really kind of two questions to the panel. The first one is, how do you think that balance should be? I mean, I have been discussing lifelong learning at home in Sweden, and I represent 400,000 students, so that is larger than the population of Iceland, as you referenced earlier. And I mean, this is a big discussion, but no one really wants to ask the question of what should the balance be between first-time students and students who come in later in life who've already had an education, and therefore there is no lifelong learning, essentially, I would say. So that's the first question. And the second question is really, do you think, Julian, I think you're an amazing man, you gave an amazing speech, but is there time to change? I mean, we talked earlier about when I asked the question of how do you steer and change a university? You know, you have to change the promotion curricula, you have to change the values, you have to change the ownership, you have to change all these things. But at the end of the day, if we don't solve these big problems, climate change and so forth, then there's not going to be, there's not going to be places for people to live. And I mean, these changes, if you look historically, because I've been working with changing promotion criteria as well, they take 20 years at least to actually gain an impact. So first, what's the balance? And then, do we have actually any time to change universities to actually help society before it's too late?
I hear that we're ending on a light note here in this panel, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to have a 40-second response, because it should be equal. And so if we start now with Anders, I'm sorry to give you such a short time, but I told you I was going to quit on time, so this has to be the way we go. And then, of course, keep mingling and talking in the coffee time. Please.
Yeah, okay, thanks for a lot of good ideas and words on the topics that have been discussed. In the role that I have now, I would like to have requirements on the universities which cannot be met by a policymaker writing a paper on what the university is for. I would like to make requirements where the universities have to show how they actually do that. So I think, Julia, I will commission you to write the preamble to our system, but I would also like to see what kind of requirements would be the proof of actually these things are happening on a level that is visible for the students, that is reaching out to the society in some more precise ways. So that is, I'm afraid that we become machines just building bureaucracy and policy making at universities, and I would like to avoid that.
Excellent, thank you. Let's go, Are.
Okay. So, wonderful continuation of the discussion. So, when looking at the title of this of this session here, we're talking about how do universities engage society and students. And you know, you can get a glimpse into that, and as I said at the beginning of my speech, I'm trying to give a short brain dump of just sort of what is the ethos of how we talk with society. I can't give you all the results, but I wanted to address, you know, one of the things that came up, which is the age of, you know, thinking of students coming in 18 years old in the universities, hanging out for 3, 4, 6, or 8 years. It's out of date. It's that time gone. Universities are an entity that will serve society, contributing to primary education, all the way from 0 to 10, all the way through life. And I'll just give you the tagline of our 2020 Plus, that in the end, when everything comes together, when it comes to the education, our goal is to provide education for opportunities for all phases of life.
Very good. Sigurður, please.
Okay, I won't take much time, but in terms of older and younger students, in my experience is that when you have a combination of both in the same learning environment, that's ideal. They learn from each other. And the older students who come in, they have learned a lot in the meantime, but they also need refresher, and so both benefit. The other thing about whether there's time, I don't know. I would like to say that it's necessary for us to think there must be time. Otherwise, we just close this shop and every other shop and just wait for our fate. So, I mean, I don't think that's an option.
Thank you.
Alan?
Well, I don't think. Sorry. I'd say there's no thing for a job for life, there's no such thing as an education for life. That's the first comment. The second, I think that I don't think there's an actual balance in this sense. This is about a porosity of the way in which the institutions change. And one of the very simple thing is most of our universities and other institutions of higher ed are closed half the year. They're empty. There may be some people doing research. What's happening to these? We've invested a whole lot of public money into institutions that are closed. I know in my place, getting a class on a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon is unheard of. The curriculum and the timetable is defined basically by the academics, not by what's required. And so there are very simple things in the whole structure and organization that if universities want to perform that role and should be as thought leaders within society, they also need to change the way they work.
Good. Thank you.
First of all, to comment on what you mentioned, Anders, I think you have a very good point. We need to do a little less talk, a little bit more of action, and it's easier to come here and say we need all of this, but how do you implement it in action? I think the solution, there's a lot of international cooperation is a big solution to that. I think there's a lot of experiences from many other higher education institutions that could be applied across the world. And I think that's a discussion that needs to be taken locally. I don't think that solutions there's not one that fits all, but it's something that we need to work to implement likely locally. But international cooperation, I think, is a way of building those experiences. Is there time to change? Well, I hope so. But I just say I hope so. That's I cannot say more than that. But if totally what you say, I mean, if we don't think there's time, there's no point in having this discussion at all. And if we want to see Iceland, not underwater. So maybe we need to hope there's time and to keep working in that direction. And if there was not enough time, well, at least we can say that we tried as much as we could.
Very good. I was supposed to sum up in the end, but I have decided not to do that as time has gone, and also because it's impossible to sum up like the end is nigh. But what I want to say in the end is one thing. I think if I had to sum up everything that we've been saying here in the last session, it would be something about trying to get away from thinking about us and them the whole time. And this sort of gets back to everything that has been discussed here, and I think it's the biggest problem of society at every single time. This part of starting thinking about us and them. And I have a great example that links to what Julian said. When I was here as a law student, I started later than most people. I had another degree before. I participated in the protests in Iceland around the crash. And I had a speech there, which was a very angry young woman's speech about just things not being right. And the speech drew a lot of attention. And in the wake of that, there were law students at this university that had protest, and they said they wanted me to stop calling myself a law student. So I don't know what I was supposed to be calling myself, a chiropractor, I don't know. I mean, I was a law student. So basically what they felt was I had removed myself from the little brackets of us by being so critical of the authorities, and I was now some sort of them. And I was supposed to announce that to make their egos feel good again about being a law student. But it's just a little example about how swiftly this moves, and how easy it is to believe that you're part of something called us, and suddenly you're them. And the only way to fix all those big questions, obviously, is becoming one us. So I think we will fix it in the end, but only by thinking like that. So thank you all very much for a great panel. Do enjoy your coffee. You did participate very well, and we'll see you in the last session. Thank you.
Well, academics in national universities in Denmark, whenever you're in office, like a sabbatical year. So I'm gonna February.
I don't know.